If you have already watched this introductory information, you can skip ahead no more than 7 minutes. Hello, welcome. I am predicting that on June 9th, 2025, Israel and the US will bomb Iran's nuclear, energy, and weapons facilities. This will likely occur in the US time zones on June 8th. I am predicting that singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025. It is predicted that on August 6th, 2025, the historic barge that has been stuck on the rocks of the Niagara River for over 100 years will finally break free and crash over Niagara Falls. The reason for this is that Niagara Falls is Noah's flood symbolism, and the barge was involved in the most dramatic rescue in the history of Niagara Falls, symbolic of Noah's Ark. Niagara in the native language means straight, narrow way, and Niagara's Horseshoe Falls is perfectly aimed at the CN Tower in downtown Toronto, because Toronto and its tower are symbolic of the Tower of Babel. In a game of horseshoes, the object is to aim the horseshoe and throw it at the metal stick, which is why the Horseshoe Falls is perfectly aimed at the metal stick that is the CN Tower. God is communicating that as testament for those who will live in the 1,000 years of Christ's reign on earth, the geography of North America will, as a result of a massive earthquake, be divided by a body of water from the Great Lakes to the Mississippi Delta. This destruction will be judgment on America and Canada for attempting to divide God's land, Israel. When this happens, the water in the Great Lakes will spill out over southern Ontario and Toronto. I am predicting that a solar flare will erupt on the surface of the sun and send a coronal mass ejection that will hit Earth on August 13th, 2025, which will knock out America's power grid and will lead to food shortages. The hit of the coronal mass ejection, predicted for August 13th, that will knock out the power grid will also knock many planes out of the sky. I am predicting that on August 30th, in the North America time zones, and on August 31st in the Asia time zones, there will be a catastrophic asteroid hit of Earth in the Indian Ocean. The greatest seismic effect of this will be felt on the other side of the globe, which is North America, and this will trigger an eruption of Yellowstone volcano and will cause the volcano in the Canary Islands to collapse into the Atlantic Ocean and send a mega tsunami towards the east coast. The asteroid will also trigger a mega landslide on Hawaii Island that will trigger a mega tsunami that will hit the west coast. It will also trigger the collapse of the Hoover Dam, which will cause a water panic in California, and many other devastating earthquakes. Michelle Obama will, quote unquote, win the election over J.D. Vance on November 7th, 2028, and will become the president on January 20th, 2029. Donald Trump is predicted to run as J.D. Vance's vice president. This scheme to overcome the 22nd Amendment will backfire and inspire Michelle Obama and Barack Obama to run on the ticket with Barack Obama as Michelle Obama's vice president. She will then step down and Barack Obama will become the president again. It is predicted that there will be a massive Mary apparition on the beach in Rio, Brazil on April 24th, 2029. It is now recognized that there will be 2 massive Mary apparitions on the beach in Rio. The first of the 2 is predicted to be on March 22nd, 2029. These predicted Mary apparitions will not be secretive. They will be mainstream, worldwide news. Like all Mary apparitions in history, including at Lourdes, Guadalupe, and Fatima, this Mary apparition will be a demon pretending to be Mary. It is predicted that on April 26th, 2029, the key will open the bottomless pit and fallen angels will cross over into the earthly realm. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to the fifth trumpet judgment that is described in Revelation chapter 9, when the demonic realm collides with the earthly realm. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to demons pretending to be aliens. The demons pretending to be aliens will claim to be here to help us with our nuclear weapons. It is predicted that Pope Francis will be resurrected from the grave on April 26th, 2029, and it is possible that on this day, Pope Francis will announce that aliens have arrived and have made him the ambassador for the world. This will immediately give Pope Francis, the Antichrist, supreme power over governments of the world. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to a zombie pandemic and the masses becoming demonically possessed that will be facilitated through the thing, which is the mark of the Antichrist and 5G frequencies. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to the coming genocide politicide in America. The resurrection rapture event will occur on Pentecost on May 27th, 2029. The day of the Lord, the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, Judgment Day, will be at the end of 2031. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right. Welcome to this very, very interesting video. Very extremely important video. And first thing is that it is being predicted that Israel and the US will bomb Iran on June 9th, 2025. All right, this prediction is being made ahead of time. The date that this video is posted proves this, as does this date here, which indicates the date that this email was composed. And I will be reading from this email to explain, among many other things, how June 9th is known ahead of time. In other words, I'll explain prophetic signs that God has demonstrated that confirm that June 9th is the date. Now, June 9th, or rather, that the fact that God is pointing to the date on which Israel and the US will bomb Iran has been known since early 2021. In other words, for many years, God has been demonstrating signs leading to this. This video is at the tail end of all of that. But along the way, God has taught through his signs he has been teaching very important things that have been the background, the foundation for the understanding for what God did just yesterday, for example. In other words, I'll be explaining the prophetic signs that occurred yesterday, but these signs stand on top of the understanding that God revealed through the many years of prophetic signs that he has been demonstrating regarding this bombing of Iran. Okay? And so, I've just titled it this because it's difficult to title anything because God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, is a giant web, and all of the signs are interconnected. In fact, none of the prophetic signs can be properly or fully understood without their context and connections to the other prophetic signs, something that those rare individuals that follow God's signs mostly don't appreciate. And so it is through the connections of the signs that God is able to tell these stories, like for what I'm about to explain, for example. And it is through these stories that God is communicating extremely essential information and knowledge that everyone needs to know. And so the purpose of this prediction that is from God is to prove the things that I will be saying. And I will be saying controversial things. And make no mistake, I know far better than you and anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction. That is from God. And it is to prove beyond any debate, period, the controversial things that I will be saying. Because these controversial things have been overwhelmingly proven to be the case in God's big picture of signs, which will be proven to be true when this prediction comes to pass. His big picture of signs that is only being explained on this channel. So, anyway, Trump genocide in South Africa and the 9th of Av on Obama's birthday. What does all that mean? Well, let me explain. So, on May 21st, 2025, which was yesterday, Trump trumpeted, because Trump is God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and highlight prophetic signs, the genocide of white South African farmers in front of the president of South Africa. Elon Musk, who is from South Africa, was standing nearby behind the couch in the Oval Office at this time. If you don't know what I'm talking about, probably because you are on the left and are subject to the wicked brainwashing of the left media, and you don't even know about what happened in the Oval Office regarding Trump calling out the president of South Africa to his face, to the world. Trump played a montage of clips of statesmen in South Africa calling for a genocide, and then he went through a big stack of examples of people, white farmers who have recently died, and he also played a clip of the thousand crosses that were attended in a commemoration event of these white farmers that have been killed in South Africa. And because it's a genocide. And the world doesn't know, and the left doesn't care, because the left is sick, twisted, ideological cultists that are only concerned about anti-white racism. Yeah. And so they will suppress anything that contradicts their religion, which is their politics, because they have no God. And so the state and their leftist politics have become their religion, and anything that contradicts it, they suppress it, like radical Muslims or something to that effect. All right? So anyway, it's also a condemnation of the left at the same time that Trump is calling out South Africa. Now, Musk, in God's signs, is symbolic of the X. Of course, he owns the X platform and also owns SpaceX. That's because X in God's signs is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, which is responsible and will be responsible for a genocide. And, well, it's complicated because the left is using the mark of the Antichrist, and did use the mark of the Antichrist, as a political weapon to persecute their enemies, true conservatives and Christians. But at the same time, they were the most prevalent people to have taken the mark of the Antichrist, and therefore, proportionately, they have suffered the most losses, the most casualties in their attempt of genocide. That's because what the left is doing is unconscious. They are not fully conscious that they work for Satan. Now, on this same day, the famous longtime owner of the Indianapolis Colts NFL football team died. The Hall of Famer, famous quarterback, one of the all-time best quarterbacks, Peyton Manning, who played for the Indianapolis Colts, paid tribute to this owner, whose name is Jim Irsay. And so the story here is that Manning paid tribute to Jim Irsay on social media. This is relevant. The two are tied together here. In other words, God is using the death of Jim Irsay to also point to Peyton Manning. But it's this story regarding the Indianapolis Colts, because these two were the leaders of this team back when Peyton Manning took the team to 2 Super Bowls. Now, Peyton Manning wears number 18. He wore number 18 for the Colts. By the way, also, one thing about 18 is that 18 is 6 plus 6 plus 6, which since it's 666, the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. And the second of the 2 Antichrists is Barack Obama, which is why Peyton Manning is known for calling out the name Omaha before the beginning of all of his plays. I mean, for whatever reason, Peyton Manning, and he had a really loud voice on the field as well. Peyton Manning shouted Omaha before the beginning of all of his plays on the field. All right? So Peyton Manning is synonymous with Omaha, which is being used by God to hint at Obama, who is the 666 Antichrist, which is why Peyton Manning, when he was calling out Omaha at the beginning of his plays on the field, wore number 6 plus 6 plus 6. Okay. Now, Irsay died on May 21st, like I was saying, this day that Trump trumpeted the white genocide of South African farmers. Irsay died on May 21st, 1800 hours before the 10th of Av in the Hebrew calendar on August 4th, 2025. So what's going on here? So the Romans burned down the second Jewish temple on the 9th and 10th of Av. It wasn't just the 9th. So the 9th of Av is this date in the Hebrew calendar that it's a holiday, but it's a somber day because it commemorates the destruction of the temples, because the Babylonians destroyed the first temple on the 9th of Av, and then coincidentally, the Romans destroyed the second temple on the 9th of Av, which then burned into the 10th of Av. And it is well known for having burned into the 10th of Av. It's like part of the story that's equally as important as the 9th of Av. But all of the other major calamities in Jewish history, and I do mean all of them, symbolically began on the 9th of Av. It actually goes back to the book of Exodus, when the Jews were to enter the promised land, but then upon the bad report by the spies that went into the promised land, doubted and didn't have faith in God's promise, God condemned them to spend another 40 years in the desert. That was the 9th of Av. Now, the other calamities that I'll just briefly list here, for example, the day that the Nazis first started putting the Jews onto the death trains officially began on the 9th of Av. The day that the Jews were first rounded up and put into the concentration camps officially began with a memo by the commandant that was dated on the 9th of Av. World War I began on the 9th of Av, which led to World War II and the Holocaust. World War I was also extremely bad for Jews in Europe. It was responsible for a lot of upheaval in Europe and led to the pogroms in Russia, for example. And then we had in 1492, the Jews kicked out of Spain by the Queen and King, and they had a deadline to leave Spain, which was the 9th of Av. Otherwise, they would be killed, unless they converted to Catholicism. And that led to the Jews being spread all around the Mediterranean and Europe, because before then they were largely in Spain. Now, Christopher Columbus sailed that same year. In fact, when he left the harbor in Spain, he was passing Jews fleeing for their lives. And he set out to find the New World. His voyage was funded by other Moranos Jews, something that people don't know. And there's now overwhelming evidence. If you haven't heard this yet, look it up. I'm not making this up. There's overwhelming evidence. The scholars now believe that it is almost a fact that Christopher Columbus was in fact Jewish and a very religious Jew. For example, the letters that he wrote to his sons contained some Hebrew writing on them. And also, the voyage was funded by Moranos Jews. It's a mystery as to where Columbus is from, and that's because he was hiding where he was from. But the dialect of Spanish that he spoke was from the area of Spain in which there were a lot of Jews. But he was in the court of the noble and the queen, and so he hid his Jewish ancestry for good reason. But also, the voyage would have most likely have been funded for the purpose of finding gold and a new safe haven for Jews that were being kicked out of Spain at that very time. The first log in Columbus's book, his logbook, was of passing Jews as he left Spain in their boats. Okay, then there was the exile of all of the Jews from France. The French gave them a deadline to leave France, which was also the 9th of Av. The first expulsion from a nation was from England on the 9th of Av, and that also was, I believe, 1296. It was 1306 in France, and that was the expulsion from England was also, they had a deadline, and it was also the 9th of Av. And by the way, the 9th of Av is a different date in the Gregorian calendar every year. This is all a coincidence. These people that decree the date on which the Jews must leave their nation do not tell themselves, let's make it on the 9th of Av to really, hurt the Jews' feelings. Okay? And anyway, also the First Crusade began by the Pope had an official start date, and it was the 9th of Av. On the way across Europe, the Crusaders killed 10,000 Jews in the first month, and of course killed Jews in the promised and in Israel too. Now, also before the First Crusade, there was the Bar Kokhba revolt in 135 AD, in which the Jews in Israel were rebelling against the Romans. This final revolt, before the emperor said he had enough and then just exiled the rest of the Jews after the defeat of the Bar Kokhba revolt in 135 AD, the Jews were following this guy Bar Kokhba, who they thought was the Messiah, and Jesus said that would happen. But anyway, that revolt was put down in one day, and an estimated 100 to 500,000 Jews were killed in one day. And that was also the 9th of Av. You can all look this up and verify that what I'm saying is true. And so then that takes us back to the first and second temples. Well, why is this a coincidence? What is God doing here? Well, God said before the Jews entered the promised land that they would eventually reject him, and that when they did, he would then chase them around the world by the sword, from nation to nation, which is exactly what happened in history. When the Jews came back to Israel, it was from almost over 100 countries. It was from over 100 countries. Now, also in that description, in the book of Deuteronomy, it clearly is alluding to Auschwitz. All right, because it says, for one thing, that when it's daytime, the Jews will wish it was night, and when it's night, they'll wish it was day, and there are other details too. But that's what the Jews were experiencing in their barracks, because the barracks, the conditions were so horrible at night, but then, during the day, of course, the conditions were so horrible as well. And so, now the question is, since God promised that he would chase them around the world by the sword after they reject him, and then they were exiled. This actually happened shortly after the Second Temple was destroyed in 70 AD. The question then is, how did the Jews reject God in the first century, before the Second Temple destruction? Well, of course, that would be by rejecting Jesus, who claimed to be God, and also prophesied the destruction of the temple. All right. And so, that's the reason for the 9th of Av. And with that explanation, there have been people that have, because of it, come to faith in Christ. Perhaps you'll be one of them, if you don't already know Christ. Perhaps that will also happen when this prediction comes to pass. I don't see why it wouldn't, because that's obviously the point of the prediction. That's one of the points. The other, like I was saying, is to prove the controversial information that I am saying in this video. Now, back to this story here. So we've got this year, the 10th of Av is on Barack Obama's birthday. He will be 4 times 4 years old. And he is, of course, the 44th president. But the 10th of Av is relevant here because this is a calamity day for Jews, and the Antichrist in Bible prophecy is said to or will persecute Jews in Judea. 1800 hours is, of course, aimed at 6 plus 6 plus 6. But anyway, again, this 1800 hours is confirmed because on this day of the death of Ursay, we have this connection to player number 18. That's what it's all about here. So that confirms the 1800 hours. But I've got more to say to that will confirm it too. Now, Manning and the Colts were beaten by player number 9. At one point, the GOAT, greatest of all time, passing king, who was the yardage leader for about a year, I think. No, a couple of years. Anyway, he played for the New Orleans Saints, which is prophetic. The Saints play in the 6 plus 6 plus 6th state, incidentally. They play in the 18th state. Anyway, this was Super Bowl 44. After the first year of the 44th president's presidency, who was inaugurated in 2009. And player number 9 was the MVP of this Super Bowl. The number 9 is the most important number in God's signs. It's from the Bible. It symbolizes God's judgment. God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. And in the Super Bowl, it was number 9 plus 9, Peyton Manning, who played the quarterback number 9. Anyway, this is pointing to the 9th of Av, like I am saying. And so Peyton is known for playing 2 Super Bowls with the Colts, the Indianapolis Colts. He won the first one and then lost the second one to player number 9 and the Saints. Now, the 9th and 10th of Av, which was when the temple was burned by the Romans, this year on August 3rd through the 4th, is 9 days before August 13th and the predicted solar flare that will knock out America's power grid, which will ultimately be part of a process that will lead to genocide in America. Okay, so what I'm going to elaborate here, but the power is going to be knocked out on August 13th, or if not, the solar flare will burst on that day, and then however long it takes to reach Earth. But August 13th is the date God is pointing to regarding this. And this is part of what I'm saying is going to lead to genocide. That's why this 9th of Av is 9 days. Well, the 10th of Av is 9 days. August 4th, Obama's birthday, to this judgment. Because again, the number 9 symbolizes judgment, which is incidentally why the 9th of Av. Because the Jews were being judged by God when both temples were destroyed. And including the other calamities that began symbolically on the 9th of Av. Oh, right. Now, at the time of Ursay's death, Forbes estimated his net worth to be $4.8 billion. That's astounding. This confirms the 1800 hours to the date 8-4, because, of course, 4.8 hints at 8-4. By the way, the name Obama is equal to 84 in Hebrew gematria as well. Okay, so that's clear, right? But there's a second confirmation for that. His death at the time of his net worth being 4.8 billion was 408 days after the path of totality of the eclipse went over Indianapolis, where he died, on the date 4/8. Wow. Because, of course, the eclipse was extremely prophetic. And it went over Indianapolis, the path of totality. I mean, Indianapolis was wholly within the path of totality of the eclipse on the date 4/8, 408 days before Ursay died in a location that was in the path of totality of the eclipse. And at the time, his net worth was 4.8 billion. It's amazing beyond words. That's stunning confirmation. It's the second witness to the relevance of adding the 1800 hours to the date 8/4 from when he died, when his net worth was 4.8 billion. Okay, and this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. So, now, therefore, the addition of 9 days to the 9th of Av and the 10th of Av makes sense. Therefore, the temple burned in fire. I said furthermore, the temple burned in fire. The sun is a fireball that will shoot fire at earth. Okay, so there's even a parallel with the burning of the temple with the sun. The 13th of August will be 18 days, 6 plus 6 plus 6 days, before the 31st of August, when it is predicted that an asteroid will hit Earth and trigger the eruption of Yellowstone volcano in the 44th state. As a result of the coming disasters this August, food crops will fail, and there will be ultimately genocide. This is what is implied with the trumpet genocide of farmers sign, prophetic sign, on the same day of Ursay's death. Okay? So, not only is this August the predicted month of the coming solar flare that will knock out the power grid, but at the end of the month, on the 31st, it's predicted that the asteroid will hit Earth and then Yellowstone will erupt. And that will spew ash into the atmosphere that will dim the sun's light, and cause crop failures, which will lead to a food shortage and ultimately genocide. Because the food shortage will be used to compel, the rationed food by the government will be used to compel people to take the mark of the Antichrist. In other words, only those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, the so-called good citizens, will be allowed to buy or sell the rationed food. That'll be restricted through digital currency. So that's what's coming, all right? And that's why we have this connection to trumpeting genocide of farmers on the day of the death of the the owner of the Indianapolis Colts, which, as I have explained now, connects with the 1800 hours. Okay, and then 9 days, and then 18 days to the asteroid. Now, Indianapolis, which is where the Colts play and where the owner died, hints at the genocide of Indians. That's the symbolism in Indianapolis. The history in America of the genocide of Indians, which did involve food. With, for example, the buffalo. The Plains Indians, one of the reasons that was encouraged, one of the reasons people were encouraged to slaughter the buffalo was to eliminate the food source for the Plains Indians. That's what's being hinted at here. This is symbolism, okay? So that's what the symbolism is in the name Indianapolis. Now, on May 14th, RFK Jr., the second witness Okay? What do I mean by that? Well, those that know some Bible prophecy know what I'm referring to when I speak of the two witnesses. Now, God is, and this is one of these controversial things that will be proven to be true when the prediction comes to pass, which is the predictions for August that I just mentioned, but also the bombing of Iran on June 9th. And I know what that sounds like to the Christian listening. You are expecting probably something that every quote-unquote Christian will recognize, and somehow non-Christians won't recognize. In other words, you're not really clear in what you think. But you somehow think that you're going to, and all Christians will know for sure, that who the two witnesses are when they come. Well, let me ask you this. Did everyone know that John the Baptist was Elijah? Jesus said, for those who have the eyes to see or the ears to hear, John the Baptist was Elijah, the promised Elijah that would come. In other words, many people, including many followers of John the Baptist, did not know that he was the promised Elijah and weren't able to recognize that. And Elijah is symbolism for the two witnesses, because there are the parallels, of course, between the description of the two witnesses in Revelation chapter 11. Now, I submit to you that what's described there in Revelation chapter 11 is only symbolism. It's allegory, just like the rest of the book of Revelation. So if the rest of the book of Revelation is allegory and symbolism, why wouldn't the two witnesses calling down fire from heaven be symbolism? It is. It's not necessarily the case that they will bring or call down fire from heaven. It's an allusion to Elijah to confirm this identity of these two witnesses. But what are the two witnesses? Well, they're ones who are testifying the truth. And God has designed it that, for example, Trump and RFK Jr., who speak truth, will not be recognized as speaking truth, including by quote-unquote Christians. Because God's main prerogative with the end times period is to separate the wheat from the chaff. Is to separate the quote-unquote Christians from the true Christians. The ones that truly hate evil and are paying attention and hate unrighteousness. And if that is the spirit inside the person, they will know what is going on, and they will know that although the worldly people can't recognize it, Trump and RFK Jr. speak the truth. And it's designed by God to be this way. Those that are not with God will not recognize this, and they will believe the lies regarding these two individuals because they believe the lies of Satan, the deeper underlying spiritual truth of the matter. Okay? And so what I'm saying is that God's signs overwhelmingly confirms that Trump and RFK Jr. are the two witnesses. And when the prediction comes to pass, it's case closed. End of debate. Period. No discussion. That's the purpose of the prediction. And I know far better than you the reason and purpose for the prediction. I'll give you just one thing. The day that they joined together on the stage with the backdrop of pyrotechnics into the air, right? Fire was exploding into the air behind them on stage. That day, August 23rd, 2024, right after RFK Jr.'s concession speech, or rather his speech when he said that he would join forces with Trump and then stepped onto the stage with Trump and shook hands. The two witnesses that day was exactly 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days after Trump's inauguration, when he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. On that day that they joined forces, August 23rd, 2024, RFK Jr. turned 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. Okay? Now, why did God do that? Well, I know the answer. You don't. If you think it's a coincidence, good luck to you. But if you know and you recognize that obviously that's not possibly a coincidence, the question is, well, why did he do that? It's because, like I said, he identified the identity of the two witnesses, who are God's instruments that he's using to speak truth. And the purpose of these two witnesses is to not be recognized by everyone. That's why. It's the whole point. That's the point. They're not supposed to be recognized by everyone. It would defeat the purpose if they were. Okay. So anyway, so what does a witness do? A witness testifies. So on this day, May 14th, RFK Jr. testified in Congress and said that ultra-processed foods are poison that is causing a genocide, quote unquote, for Native Indians. Again, Indianapolis is symbolic of the genocide of Indians that used food. But here's RFK Jr. in a completely different context, trumpeting or testifying this same symbolism, because he's talking about a genocide of Native Indians involving food, ultra-processed foods. Same thing as the slaughter of the buffalo. The area code for Indianapolis is 317. May 14th, 2025, when RFK Jr. testified about genocide of Native Indians because of food. And again, the coming genocide will be because of food, like I just explained. Those who take the mark will not be able to eat food. Okay, so the day that RFK Jr. testified about food and genocide is 3 months and 17 days before the predicted asteroid that will cause the eruption of Yellowstone and lead to genocide and a food shortage. And again, Indianapolis, which also God pointed to in all of this, has the area code 317, and that's why the 3 months and 17 days connection. Now, G317 in the Greek concordance is the Greek word in the Bible that means of necessity, i.e. compulsion, because required, obligatory. That hints at the mark of the Antichrist. People will be compelled, required, in order to eat, to take the mark of the Antichrist. That's why Indianapolis's area code is 317. That's why RFK Jr., one of God's two witnesses, testified in Congress about genocide and food 3 months and 17 days before the predicted asteroid that will cause the food shortage, which will lead to genocide. Also, what is RFK Jr. most known for, at least right now, and his purpose for being in the position of power that he's in? Calling out the truth regarding the thing. And you know what I'm talking about, the thing that you can't talk about, because it is the mark of the Antichrist. The CVD thing is the mark of the Antichrist. All right? The thing that uses the MR and ends with an NA, that thing is the mark of the Antichrist that alters a person's 23 pairs of chromosomes, which is why they are marked. And what they are marked with is the insertion of snake venom into their chromosomes. The symbol of snake, or the snake is the symbol of evil in the Bible. So they are marked by Satan with the snake venom in their chromosomes. That's the mark of the Antichrist. And so RFK Jr., who's known for that, testified with this connection involving compulsion, obligatory, required, etc., to the day of the coming asteroid hit, which will lead to the food shortage, which will be part of the restriction for only those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, the thing that RFK Jr. is known for, calling out the truth regarding that thing. Do you see how all of this is beautiful? How God does all of this? Now the thing is, the day that RFK Jr. testified regarding genocide and Indians and food was May 14th, 2025, and it was the 77th anniversary of Israel. And it was 7 days before the owner of the Indianapolis Colts died on the day that Trump trumpeted farmers and genocide. Do you see? Again, the two men at their ages of 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days, were those 2 days when they reached that age were 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days apart. Again, that was the day of the inauguration, the beginning of Trump's presidency, and when they came together on the stage with fire in the background, in the air, as in Revelation chapter 11 with fire coming down from heaven, right? Now, and so that's the 3 sets of 7, the 77th anniversary of Israel plus 7 days to get you from the second of the 2 witnesses testifying about food and genocide to the trumpet in the White House talking about farmers, food, and genocide. Wow. Now, Ursi, the owner of the Indianapolis Colts, did not know that his father was Jewish until he was 7 plus 7 years old. And again, he died 7 days after the 77th anniversary of Israel. Ursi died in Carmel, Indiana. Carmel hints at Elijah because of him calling down fire on top of Mount Carmel in the Bible. And Elijah, again, is symbolic of the 2 witnesses. So that's another confirmation between this connection of 7 days between these 2 witnesses calling out food and genocide. Because Ursi died in Carmel, and that's hinting at Elijah, who is symbolism for the 2 witnesses. Again, RFK Jr. is one of the 2 witnesses. 7 days is 1.92% of a calendar year, and Obama in English gematria is equal to 192. Ursi was born in Chicago. Obama is known for being the president from Chicago. The Super Bowl Ursi and Manning won was against Chicago. That Super Bowl, and God uses records or extremes for prophetic signs, that particular Super Bowl, the 2 teams the 2 cities that were represented by the teams in the Super Bowl were the record closest to each other in Super Bowl history. In other words, Indianapolis and Chicago are right near each other, and Ursi's from Chicago, born there, and owned the Indianapolis Colts. And the Super Bowl that he won was against Chicago. So we've got this connection here with Chicago, which is for the purpose, of course, of pointing to Barack Obama, because in God's signs, Chicago is symbolism for Obama. The cities are connected. The 2 cities are connected by the I-65, the Interstate 65. That's why Ursi died at the age of 65, which was partly news because it's a relatively young age to die at. Okay, that Super Bowl, the one that Ursi and Manning won against Chicago, was played on February 4th, 2007, exactly 222 months before August 4th, 2025, this date we are looking at, this date that is again 1,800 hours after Ursi died, and player number 18 paid tribute to him on social media. Okay, so we have this connection of exactly 222 months. By the way, CVD Day on March 11th, 2020 was exactly 222 months after 9/11 in 2001. And that's why I knew ahead of time, since November of 2019, that something big, bad, and world-changing would occur on March 11th, 2020, and I wasn't saying that about any other date. And I knew that because of the 222 months connection, because through the 9/11 events, God pointed to George Washington, who was born on the date 222. But anyway, back to what I'm talking about in this video. The Super Bowl, this one in 2007 on February 4th, is exactly 222 months before August 4th, 2025, this 10th of Av date and Obama's birthday, which is again 9 days before August 13th. This is a typo. The date of the predicted solar flare that will knock out the power. So this is a pairing of 9 and 22, because 222 symbolizes 922. And God pairs 9 and 22 together to confirm the signs and connections. And this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming matters the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And if we think about it, one simple way in which he would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9 and 22. And I know this because I've been studying his big picture of signs from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 7 years. Now, the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist is described in the book of Ezekiel chapter 9, and the mark, and that would have been a Tav mark, and the Tav letter in the Hebrew alphabet is the last letter and the 22nd letter. The mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, which is the 22nd out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. Also, the mark of the Antichrist changes a person's chromosomes, and chromosomes come in pairs, and each chromosome has 2 arms, and so 2 and 2, as in 22. And so that's why God pairs 9 and 22 together. This also confirms the 1800 hours between Ursay's death and August 4th. Okay, because we have a connection between the Peyton Manning Ursay Super Bowl that they won to August 4th. And also from the death of Ursay, it was 1800 hours to August 4th. And so in other words, the two connections confirm each other. Now, Manning and Ursay's Colts played in 2 Super Bowls. That's another reason for the 222 months connection here. Also, Barack Obama, whose birthday is being connected to with 222 months, will serve a second presidency. And he will be vanquished before the second coming, or at the second coming, of Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, now, the Indianapolis Super Bowl on February 4th, 2007 was the first, God uses firsts for signs, it was the first Super Bowl in which both coaches were black and all of the players wore black shoes. It was 3 days before the first black president announced he was running for president. That's why. That's the prophetic significance of this Super Bowl. It was pointing to Obama, who declared his running for president 3 days later. Okay, Indianapolis Colts player number 4, the GOAT, as in greatest of all time of kicking, which hints at the GOAT Antichrist, who is the 44th president. Player number 4, the GOAT of kicking, won his 4th Super Bowl with this win, this Colts Super Bowl win. Okay, player number 4 won his 4th Super Bowl. He's the GOAT. He hints at the GOAT Antichrist, the 44th president, which declared his run for presidency, for the 44th presidency, 3 days after this Super Bowl, in which player number 4, the GOAT, won his 4th Super Bowl. He kicked 3 field goals, which confirms the 3 days connection. And 3 field goals by player number 4 hints at 444. But that also is the number in the Greek concordance of the word for man. And the number 6 is symbolic of man also, which is why the Antichrist's number is 666. The 2 Colts Super Bowls were 3 years apart. Okay? So this Super Bowl that was 3 days before Obama announced was also 3 years before their other Super Bowl. They're they only played in 2 Super Bowls in history. 222 months after their first Super Bowl will be August 4th, 2025, and Obama, which hints at Obama, it's his birthday, and Obama will serve a 3rd term. That's the reason for the 3 days and 3 years apart. Obama will serve a 3rd term. The election on November 7th, 2028, that's a typo, will be 3 years, 3 months, and 3 days after August 4th, 2025. That's hinting at the 3rd term. So this date is clearly Obama. Again, he will turn 4 times 4 times 4 years old on this day. He was the 44th president. Okay, this is the Obama day. It's also the 10th of Av, which makes it doubly Obama day. And this day is 3 years, 3 months, and 3 days before he's predicted to be elected. And then he will serve a third term. Now, it's predicted he'll be elected the vice president, Michelle Obama's vice president. She will then step down, and he will become the president. On August 4th, 2025, Obama will be 4 times years old. 3 field goals, number 4, hence at 444. And again, he won his 4th Super Bowl win. Barack Obama was born in August because Caesar Augustus, for whom the month of August was named after, took complete control of the food supply in 22 BC. This is why the Super Bowl, at the time of Obama's announcement to run for president, will be exactly 222 months before his birthday, on the anniversary of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem by the Romans, as in the Roman Emperor Caesar Augustus. Did you get that? But this temple, by the way, was the second temple. I forgot that. Well, you know what? I didn't forget it. It just came to me, actually. But it's so obvious. It's like, wow. And that's what happens when you go through the information. You're constantly realizing new things. So let me rewind here again. This date, this 10th of Av, is being pointed to with 222 months. And it was the Romans that destroyed the temple on the 10th of Av. It was destroyed on the 9th, but burned into the 10th. Out of all of the calamities that the Jews experienced on the 9th of Av, only one of them is known for also continuing into the 10th of Av, which involved the Romans and the Second Temple, which is why the 222 months connection from the time that Obama announced his run for president. But God used the Super Bowl to point to all of this. It's amazing. Now, one thing that I also forgot, Obama announced his run for the 44th presidency in a location where the 4x4th president announced his run for presidency, Abraham Lincoln. The exact same location is where Obama announced his presidency. Lincoln was the 4x4th president, and Obama became the 44th president. And then we have this connection from the Super Bowl in which the GOAT, number 4, won his 4th Super Bowl. And we have a connection, and it was 3 field goals he kicked, in other words, 444. And we have this connection of 222 months to the day that Obama will turn 4 times 4 years old, on the day that commemorates the Second Temple destruction by the Romans, which hints at Caesar Augustus, who took complete control of the food supply in 22 BC. And again, that is the reason for the 222 months to this 9th of Av date involving the Romans and the Second Temple. The 9th and 10th of Av on August 3rd through 4th will connect with 9 days to the predicted solar flare, and August 4th connects with 9 plus 9 plus 9 days to the predicted asteroid and eruption of Yellowstone in the 44th state. God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. Again, the number 9 is the most important number in God's signs. It's from the Bible. It symbolizes God's judgment. The judgment coming on America is the coming food shortage that will be triggered by the eruption of the Yellowstone volcano, which will lead to the rationing of food and the government and Obama, the Antichrist, taking complete control of the food supply, which is why Obama was born in August, because of Caesar Augustus, who took complete control of the food supply in 22 BC. Also, Caesar Augustus' uncle was assassinated in 44 BC, and Obama was the 44th president. Did I say Julius Caesar? Yeah, okay, hopefully I did. Yeah, that was the uncle that was assassinated in 44 BC. One other interesting thing, too, is that Caesar Augustus was the leader on one side of the civil war in Rome, in which he chased Mark Antony to Egypt in 31 BC. The beginning of Isaiah chapter 31 begins with, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt," which is what the 44th president did upon being elected, he went down to Cairo, Egypt, to deliver a speech to the Muslim world in order to tell the Muslim world that America is no longer a Christian nation, because he is the Antichrist. Woe to those who go down to Egypt and rely on horses, which incidentally is one reason why the name Indianapolis Colts. That's another story, though. I don't know how to tie that in, come to think of it at this very minute, because I just thought of that. But I knew long before this video, in fact, years ago, that the Indianapolis Colts are part of this Isaiah chapter 31 prophecy, which, by the way, speaks of the Antichrist and him being on the Temple Mount and his destruction. But the prophecy and chapter begins with woe to those who go down to Egypt, which is why Caesar Augustus went down to Egypt to chase Mark Antony and kill him at the end of the Civil War. Now, Prince performed the halftime show of Super Bowl 41. That's the Super Bowl I'm talking about, when the Indianapolis Colts beat the Chicago Bears. That was Super Bowl 41. Prince performed the halftime show. And again, this Super Bowl was 222 months, or is 222 months exactly, before August 4th, 2025. Now, August 4th, 2025 will be the exact, or will be exactly 41 years after Prince's Purple Rain album reached number 1 on the Billboard chart after spending 4 weeks on the chart. That's why. Okay, so that's why Prince performed the Super Bowl halftime show for Super Bowl 41, this prophetic Super Bowl. It's why it was Super Bowl 41. It's because Prince's Purple Rain reached number 1 on August 4th, exactly 41 years before this upcoming date that will symbolize the Prince. In Bible prophecy, the Prince who is to come is the Antichrist in Daniel chapter 9. The Prince who is to come is a descendant of the Romans, as it says in that prophecy. The leader of the Romans, the descendant leader, and popes are descendants of the emperors. The first pope was an emperor. That's how Daniel chapter 9 clearly identifies the Pope as the Antichrist, who is the first of the two Antichrists. Barack Obama is the second, which is another reason why the 222 months connection between the Obama dates, incidentally. Okay, now, so you see, 41 is the 13th prime number. Well, let me just finish this here. So it spent 4 weeks on the chart, all right? Again, the 44th president, the number 4 in that Super Bowl that Prince was the halftime for, the GOAT of kicking. He won his 4th Super Bowl. Okay, now the reason for Purple Rain is because it identifies Rome. Because Rome, ancient Rome, was known for producing the very expensive purple cloth. The purple cloth was expensive and hard to produce, and it was produced in Rome and exported around the ancient world. So Rome was known for its export of purple linen, which is why the color purple is associated with royalty, because it was expensive. And that's Prince. Prince, and he's royalty, but it's Purple Rain, right? This is by far his most famous album. In fact, 2024 Apple Music ranked Purple Rain the 4th album of all time, which is why Purple Rain reached number 1 on Obama's birthday after 4 weeks on the chart. Now, 41 is the 13th prime number. Prince died exactly 13 years before Pope Francis died. And Pope Francis is the prince who is to come, the first of the two Antichrists. Francis's funeral will be exactly 4 years before his resurrection, his predicted resurrection on April 26th, 2029. That's why Purple Rain reached number 1 after 4 weeks on Obama's birthday, the second of the two antichrists. It's to confirm this 4 years connection. There are many other 4s which I've talked about in another video regarding Prince. But again, Apple Music also ranked Purple Rain the 4th album of all time. And that was the latest ranking before the death of Pope Francis, therefore confirming the 4 years. The 4th song on Purple Rain is Computer Blue. The color of the Indianapolis Colts is blue. Prince performed at the Indianapolis Colts' Super Bowl. Computers are what will be used to enforce the mark of the Antichrist. In fact, when John said that the image of the beast spoke an indecipherable, indistinguishable language, it's because he was referring to computer code, which is a language, but not like a human language, which is why what John saw, because he didn't know about computers, described it as being an unintelligible language, an alien language, some kind of weird language. So the image of the beast is computers and smartphones, which will be used to enforce the mark of the Antichrist through digital currency. Okay? Indiana is the 19th state to join the Union. The owner of the Indianapolis Colts died in Carmel, Indiana, 19 days before June 9th. The date it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran. The date June 9th, 6-9, hints at 6 divided by 9 equals 0.666, the number of the Antichrist. That's the theme of what all of these connections are, including, for example, the association of the owner of the Colts with Peyton Manning, who wore number 6 + 6 + 6. Now, again, he died in Indiana. I've explained now the prophetic significance of Indiana and how it ties to the genocide of Indians, etc. And that's why he died on the day that Trump trumpeted genocide and farming, etc. Okay, I explained all that. So that's why the 19th state is relevant. And he died in the 19th state 19 days before this big date that God is pointing to, which hints at 666. And he died on the day of the association with player number 6 + 6 + 6. The predicted bombing in Iran was symbolized Revelation 9:11. So let me briefly explain. So the bombing in Iran, the use of bunker busters that the US will use, will drill in deep into the earth of Iran to get at the nuclear weapons facilities embedded into the earth of Iran. And in doing so, they will engender massive pits in Iran. Iran is Persia, and the Prince of Persia in the Bible is a name for Satan, and the Prince of Persia battles the Archangel Michael in the demonic realm. And so, and in Revelation 9, which is symbolized by Revelation 9:11, the bottomless pit is opened. That's why the opening of pits in Persia is symbolic of Revelation 9:11. So, okay, now, that's also what the 19th state hints at. Also, 19 is the 4 + 4th prime number. Ursay died and Trump trumpeted genocide. The 4 + 4th prime number of days before June 9th, which will be exactly 4 + 4 weeks before the 4 × 4 × 4th birthday of the 44th president on August 4th, the 10th of Av. And that, my friends, I believe is it for this video. I hopefully have explained everything here. It is amazing beyond words. Don't ever stop sharing this video or some video on this channel that makes the prediction. And don't only share it in places you normally go. Go to where the enemy is, where you never go. Don't just preach to the choir, in other words. And don't ever stop doing so. This is a bag of gold. Pay attention to what Jesus said to the Christians, quote unquote, and the one that did nothing with his bag of gold. And he was a believer. He was a quote unquote Christian. And that Christian was banished to hell. Also read Ezekiel 3:33 for the consequences for those who watch and do nothing with the information. So you need to work. And I know evangelicals have a phobia regarding work because of their false doctrine. But you need to do something with this bag of gold. All right, enough said. God bless. Please get the word out. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible. In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.